السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. وقال تعالى: وإلى مدين أخاهم شعيبا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره ولا تنقصوا المكيال والميزان إني أراكم بخير وإني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم محيط. ويا قوم أوفوا المكيال والميزان بالقسط ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين. بقية الله خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين وما أنا عليكم بحفيظ. قالوا يا شعيب أصلاتك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء إنك لأنت الحليم الرشيد. Dear brothers and respected sisters, roughly 20 years ago, in October 2001, the US witnessed the largest bankruptcy in its history at that point. And it was from a company that Fortune magazine, for 6 consecutive years prior to that, had called it America's most innovative company. And along with it, it saw the dissolution of one of the top 5 auditing and accounting companies in the world. Many of you may recall that. That bankrupt company was Enron, and that auditing company was Arthur Andersen. The company misled investors through shady accounting practices and poor auditing until its eventual bankruptcy. And it became the symbol of corporate greed. Think about, just take a guess in your mind, of how much Enron investors lost due to that corruption, due to that corporate greed. That number is $74 billion. The investors lost $74 billion. Imagine that number. Enron stock went from $90 in mid-2000s to trading just around 26 cents at the end of 2001. From $90 to 26 cents over a little over a year. People lost their life savings. And we think about this injustice to people, and we think, how can someone do that? How can someone do that? But let me give you another example, second example, of a person you may have heard of by the name of Bernie Madoff. Madoff was the chairman of NASDAQ in the early 90s and one of the most respected investors. He managed billions of dollars in investments until the end of around 2008, when he confessed to running the largest Ponzi scheme in history for at least 17 years. And of course, he wasn't alone in his fraud. Others helped him, and others suspected something was wrong, but they turned a blind eye. Why? Because they were getting their returns. In fact, even the banks where he deposited his funds knew something was wrong, but they chose to ignore it and never raise any issues. Why? Because why would they when they were earning about $500 million in returns through those deposits that he had in their banks? But who lost? The investors. $17 billion of principal investment. Bernie Madoff, who managed billions of dollars in investments, was sentenced to 150 years in prison and went from managing billions of dollars in investments to making $40 a month through prison labor. This is قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the dominion to whom He wishes and takes it away from whom He wishes, and grants honor to whom He wishes and takes it away from whom He wishes. Managing billions of dollars to earning $40 a month through prison labor. And why did Bernie Madoff do this? And this is the mind-boggling part. He said himself that I had more than enough money to sustain my lifestyle and my family's lifestyle, that I didn't need to do this for that. He didn't need to do this to maintain a lifestyle. It just became a habit. It just became something of its own. And look at the people's loss. And again, we think, how can someone do that? And this isn't something that just happens in the corporate world with non-Muslims, happens in the Muslim community as well. I'm from Chicago, and there was one particular one in Chicago some years back, where a Sharia investment company that marketed to religious, traditional Muslims, supporting, pitching to them these halal investments, duped them into what turned out to be a $44 million Ponzi scheme. The investors lost collectively about $30 million, many of them their entire life savings. I personally know of people who had paid off homes, took out equity from their homes, and invested, only then to find out that it was a part of a Ponzi scheme, and they lost. They lost that money, and now they're back to paying off the homes that were once paid off. Banks were defrauded another $14 million as part of that. And again, we think, how can someone do that? How can you do that? And the answer to how can someone do that is if a person lacks the fear of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if a person lacks taqwa, then they can do that. The way that somebody can do such a thing is if they don't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they lack taqwa. And the lack of taqwa can lead a person to the most heinous of crimes against both the Creator and the creation. Therefore, we see a consistent pattern in the prophets that came and their message to people. They all came about warning to people to have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Read Surah Ash-Shu'ara. You see the same consistent pattern of verses, one after another, from story of one prophet to the next prophet, to the next prophet, to the next prophet, and you see the same thing, the same pattern. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, كَذَّبَتْ قَوْمُ نُوحٍ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. The nation of Nuh, they disbelieved in their prophet. They denied the prophets. إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ نُوحٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. When their brother Nuh alayhi salam told them that do not fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ. That I am a trustworthy messenger to you. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. Have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow me. That was the message. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. Have taqwa and obey my commands. Obey me. وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That I am not asking you for any compensation in return. My compensation is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What I'm asking is that you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was Nuh alayhi salam's message. And you start to see then the same thing, messenger after messenger after messenger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then mentions, كَذَّبَتْ عَادٌ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ هُودٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That the Qawm of Ad, they did the same thing. That their brother Hud alayhi salam told them that do not have taqwa. That have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obey me. I'm not asking you for anything in return. My return is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same thing about taqwa. Allah subhanahu mentions, كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودٌ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ صَالِحٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. The Qawm of Thamud did the same thing. And their brother Salih told them the same thing. Have taqwa and obey me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of the Qawm of Lut alayhi salam. كَذَّبَتْ قَوْمُ لُوطٍ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ أَخُوهُمْ لُوطٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Same thing with Lut alayhi salam. Told them have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the story of then Shu'aib alayhi salam. كَذَّبَ أَصْحَابُ الْأَيْكَةِ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِذْ قَالَ لَهُمْ شُعَيْبٌ أَلَا تَتَّقُونَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ رَسُولٌ أَمِينٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Shu'aib alayhi salam did the same thing to his people, told them to have taqwa. And I want to focus on the message of Shu'aib alayhi salam to his qawm. Shu'aib alayhi salam, he was a great orator, great speaker, and was known as the Khatib al-Anbiya, the speaker amongst the Anbiya. And he was from the progeny of Madian, who was the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam, from the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he was related to Lut alayhi salam as well as being the father-in-law of Musa alayhi salam. His story is mentioned in the Quran. His people in the Quran are mentioned in two ways, as Madian and Aika. Madian was the tribe and the locality where they lived, and the tribe became known as Madian, and it's currently in modern day East Jordan. And Aika means forest. His qawm is referenced in the Quran as both Madian and Aika. There's difference of opinion on that. Some ulama have mentioned that these were two different settlements. That first Shu'aib alayhi salam went to Madian, and then when they did not listen and then they were punished, then he went to the people of Aika, and then they did the same thing and they were punished there as well. That the punishment of Madian was sayha, this scream that just destroys people, and the punishment of Aika was what's known as dhulla. Dhulla is a form of punishment where initially there was this scorching heat that was essentially roasting people, and then they saw shade over a forest. So all the criminals went into the forest, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rained down fire upon them. And then the earth shook, and they killed them all. This is the form of punishment. Others, however, such as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he prefers the opinion that they were the same people, and that three forms of punishment converged on them. That three forms of punishment converged on them. That there was first fire from the clouds, and then there was that screeching scream, and then the earth shook, and they were destroyed with three different types of adhab from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whether they're the same people or different people, we need to look at what was the crime that they were involved in, so that we can take the lesson from that. The tribe of Shu'aib alayhi salam were heedless of both the huququllah and the huququl ibad, the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rights of people. They refused the huquq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He must be worshipped alone, that they disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they disbelieved in the Shu'aib alayhi salam, and they would sit at entry points in the streets, and they would terrorize newcomers, and they would rob them of their belongings, and they would say that it would be worse for them if they listened to the message of Shu'aib alayhi salam. And they sought to twist the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, تَبْغُونَهَا عِوَجًا mentioned in the Quran, to misrepresent the deen. That was their violations in the huquq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they also violated the huququl ibad, the rights of people as well, by cheating them in their financial transactions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ قَدْ جَاءَتْكُم بَيِّنَةٌ مِّن رَّبِّكُمْ فَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ وَلَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بَعْدَ إِصْلَاحِهَا ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. That He told them that do not cheat people, that be fair and just in your measurements, that do not deprive people what is due to them, and don't cause fasad, don't cause corruption in the earth. That these actions where you violate people's financial rights will lead to corruption. Don't cause corruption in the earth. But they cheated people, and they were fraudulent in their transactions, and they deprived people what was due to them, and this caused fasad in the earth, both spiritual and financial. And hence, Shu'aib alayhi salam first gave da'wah to them to have tawheed. First gave da'wah and called them to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the second thing that he called them toward, after calling them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was to be fair in your financial dealings, to be just in your financial dealings. And it's important to note that all the previous nations, they were destroyed due to their disbelief. They were destroyed due to their disbelief and their denial of faith. But there's two nations that were destroyed both because of their disbelief and because of their interpersonal relationships, and how they dealt with people and how they interacted with people. Two nations. Those two nations are the qawm of Lut alayhi salam due to their evil practice, and the qawm of Shu'aib alayhi salam due to their unethical business practices. That the crimes of Lut alayhi salam, the qawm of Lut alayhi salam, that the way they interacted with people was impermissible, and they were destroyed as that being one of the reasons. And the people of Shu'aib alayhi salam, they were destroyed also because of their ways of dealing with people, which was that their corruption in their financial dealings. And we can see the evil in these actions, that these nations were destroyed, as that being part of the reason. And the reason why the people of Shu'aib alayhi salam would cheat people in their financial dealings has a lot of resemblance to why people cheat in their financial dealings today. Allah SWT mentions in the Quran that وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ وَلَا تَنقُصُوا الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانَ إِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ مُحِيطٍ. That Shu'aib al-Islam, when he warns them about being just in their financial dealings, he says, إِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ. That I see you are well off. That they weren't doing it because they had financial need necessarily. It wasn't because of a need that they were cheating people. They were financially comfortable. It just became a habit and a lifestyle. It wasn't because of a need. Okay? Brings back to that same reason that Bernie Madoff had said for why he cheated people in their deals. Okay? And if Shu'aib says that, وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ, that he says, إِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ وَإِنِّي أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ مُحِيطٍ. That I see that what you have is well. And that if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you would not, that if you are well off, then you have no reason, even more so, to violate the rights of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is no benefit that comes through wealth that is not earned from a proper means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Hud that وَلَا تَبْخُسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ بَقِيَّةُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ وَمَا عَلَيْكُمْ بِحَفِيظٍ. That بَقِيَّةُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. That don't cheat people, and whatever is left with you by Allah is better for you. That don't be unethical in your financial dealings. That whatever little halal that you may have will be better for you than anything that you may earn more that is through haram means. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he narrates from the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ said that inna riba wa in kasura aqibatuhu tasiru ila qul. That riba, although it seems like it's growing, right? If a person puts X amount of dollars in the bank account and that person earns interest on it, it seems like the money is growing. But the Prophet said that aqibatuhu tasiru ila qul. The end result of that will be, it'll lead to deprivation. That there will be no barakah in that wealth. That you think you have money, but you have nothing at the end. The nation of Shu'aib al-Islam, they had a misconception. One of their misconceptions was the role of religion in a person's financial dealings. That they thought that religion didn't pertain to financial dealings. That it had no say in a person's financial dealings. And they objected to Shu'aib alayhi salam on that. They said that قالوا يا شعيب أصلاتك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء إنك لأنت الحليم الرشيد. That they said that your prayer, Shu'aib alayhi salam, that does it tell you that we should stop worshipping what our forefathers worshipped and that we have restrictions on what we can do in our wealth? They thought that the wealth that they had belonged to them, that the role of religion had no say within it. But we know that the wealth is actually the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is being given to us. But it in the end goes and belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah mentions in the Quran that وَابْتَغُوا مِن فَضْلِ اللَّهِ, that seek from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our hands. It still belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be used in accordance to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And unfortunately, sometimes people have a similar mindset where they say, tell us about, salah, and tell us about zakat, and tell us about saum and hajj and the rights of spouses and such, but don't tell us about our finances. Don't tell us that, if we're selling liquor, if we're selling lottery, that this is a problem. Don't talk to us about that. Talk to us just about the ibadat. We can't have that mindset. Okay? Anyone who studied anything from the Sharia or has read the Quran even, understand that Islam puts a lot of emphasis on ethical financial transactions. The longest verse in the Quran is in Surah Baqarah, and what does it deal with? It deals with the laws of contract. There's more than 20 rulings in that verse pertaining to the laws of contract, right? The documentation of details, financial ethics that pertain to minors and those who are mentally deficient, the rulings that pertain to witnesses, the number, the qualifications, the refusal of witnesses. There's so many rules within that verse, and they all pertain to financial transactions. That's the longest verse in the Quran. Unlawful wealth in the Sharia holds no value whatsoever. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu narrates from the Prophet ﷺ that he said that no man acquires unlawful property and gives some of it in zakat, gives some of it in sadaqah, and that he will not have it accepted from him. Neither will he receive a blessing for it if he contributes some of it. And if he leaves some of it behind, it will be his provision for hell. So the Prophet mentioned that if a person earns haram money, even if you're giving that away in sadaqah and zakat and in these good avenues, it won't be accepted. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of haram wealth. That it will not be accepted from him. If he's giving any of it in his lifetime in good ways, like in good avenues, it won't be accepted. And if he leaves it behind, and he thinks he's leaving behind it for his children and for his family, the Prophet mentioned that he's not leaving it behind for them, he's leaving it behind for himself in the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us. And the Sharia put a lot of emphasis then on ethical financial dealings. And if you look, and if you study some of the juridical rulings as they pertain to financial transactions, the fuqaha, the jurists are very particular, they're very nuanced. And there's examples where they would say that, for example, if a person bought a car for $5,000 and then let's say he had some transportation costs that cost him $500, so his out-of-pocket was $5,500. If that person sells the car to someone and says, I bought this car for $5,500 and I'm only charging you, a $500 profit, I'm selling it to you for $6,000. In that example, the fuqaha have said that that is not permissible. Why? Because that person says, I have bought the car for $5,500, which was inaccurate. He should have said, I bought the car for $5,000 and I incurred another $500 in expenses. Or he should have said that the car cost me this much, but he shouldn't have said, I bought the car for this much. They're very nuanced in when it came to financial transactions to maintain the most ethical standards in that dealing because of its importance. And we have to understand corruption in financial wealth isn't just something that happens at the top, with people in politics, with people at the top of large corporate entities. It happens all the way up and down the ladder in different ways. That if a person owns a business, then marketing that business or marketing their products in an improper manner, that's showing images that have been digitally touched to give a different impression of how the product actually looks like, or to say that it has features that it doesn't have, or people in sales when they go and pitch a service or a product to someone to be delivered at a certain time that they know will not be delivered at that time. These are all unethical practices. Not disclosing faults in things that we're selling. If a person's car has an issue and they take it to the mechanic and the mechanic says, listen, this car, there's something wrong with the engine, it's going to be a huge expense on you, what does the person do? He says, sell it. Make it somebody else's problem. Without disclosing that the car has an issue. The Wathil ibn Asqa radiallahu anhu narrates in the Prophet that he mentioned that if anyone sells a defective article without drawing attention to it, then there are different narrations, but either that he will remain under Allah's anger or that the angels will continue to curse him. There's two different narrations. It's a serious matter. Employees, people applying for jobs, lying on their resume, claiming skills, claiming experience that they don't have. It's unethical. It's wrong. Not putting in the proper time that a person's being paid for to do the work that they're being paid for, right? People working from home now, and they're supposed to be working, but now, because they're home, they're doing all sorts of things. Right? That's unethical practice. Somebody is paying you for a task for your time. A person has to be mindful of that. That when people travel, and then you call a friend for dinner and say, join me for dinner, and then you say, okay, I'll pay for both of us because the company will expense me. The company will expense you for your dinner, not friend's dinner. Right? All these unethical practices, they happen, and they're so common. They're so common. Okay? All of us need to be mindful of it. All of us need to be mindful of it. That we have to be mindful of how we're dealing in our financial transactions. That unethical and unlawful business dealings and financial transactions are a serious matter. It explicitly is discussed in the Quran, and a prophet was sent to address this as well. And an entire nation was destroyed because of this. And not just destroyed, but destroyed with 3 different forms of adab on them. The rajfa, the sayha, the dhulla, 3 different forms of punishment that came down upon this qawm because of this. This has a massive impact on one's own spirituality, on one's own livelihood, and on the community. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curses such people in the Quran. It says, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ لِيَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That woe to the curtailers, woe to them when they measure something to receive from people, they take it in full, and when they measure to give, then they give less than their due. Right? People who are unethical in their transactions, that do they not think that they're going to be raised on the day of judgment? Then what are these people doing? And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us the taqwa so that all of our affairs can be in manners that are pleasing to Him, and that we have the proper knowledge of what are lawful and unlawful transactions, and that to implement that in our lives as well, and to safeguard us from all forms of corruption and curtailing people's rights and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rights as well. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن المجيد ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. استغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله وصحبه الذين اجتبى. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم صل على محمد كلما ذكره الذاكرون وصل عليه كلما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين. اللهم اشفنا واشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين. اللهم انصر المسلمين المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم، واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا معهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقيموا الصلاة. Please make sure that you move forward and fill in the gaps in the rows in front of you. Please look to the corners to make sure that the saf is complete all the way to the corners in front of you, and make sure that your lines are straight and you're standing shoulder to shoulder.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ويل لكل همزة لمزة الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله أخلده كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في عمد ممددة. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.